Today, Alison, we are going to have a market tidbit on the stay-at-home economy, and we wrote a report a few weeks ago about this stay-at-home economy, which was, of course, impacted by what happened in February, March, April with the COVID-19, the coronavirus. And we mentioned through the report a new type of segmentation, which is not totally new with the COVID, but which is new with the expansion of the internet and apps and so on, called the Zhai segment, Zhai generation, Zhai people. What are the Zhai people? What do we say within the report?
So Zhai people is basically a definition for people who prefer to stay at home than go out. And previously, this would include maybe more introverted people. It's also related to the Japanese word otaku, which is related to otaku economy, which is the economy of watching anime at home, playing video games all day. But now the Zhai economy, and especially since COVID-19, has expanded to include a lot of different services that you can do at home. So the original definition was a little bit more geeky, but now it really includes everyone, even people who work out, anybody who has to go to school, or anybody who has to telecommute into work.
So we could mention not only the Zhai people, but the Zhai economy, meaning you could become a Zhai from time to time. And the pandemic made some people, more people, Zhai people, right?
Yeah. And so originally the Zhai economy was a little bit more male than female, about 55% male, 45% female. And the age group was mostly 18 to 34-year-olds. It's the very digital group of people, and they're very plugged in. Traditionally, they would be gamers, but yeah, like I mentioned, now it really includes like even anybody just shopping for groceries is participating in the, if they're doing it from home, they're participating in the Zhai economy from home.
So we know that people spend more time online during the COVID-19 pandemic, and we know that they actually emphasized some use they already had, but they had also new use of the internet. What are the trends which could have explored and have impacted the stay-at-home economy with COVID-19?
So some of the trends that we can talk about are increase in social media use, and then online shopping is a really big one. Of course, in China, a lot of people shop online, but now it's even more so. Including online fitness, and then of course, remote work and study platforms is also increasing. And lastly, mobile gaming and other entertainment, including attending concerts from your living room.
Yeah, and talking about fitness app, there is one app which was a winner during this lockdown, which is the app Keep, Keep. What kind of app succeeded in those categories? Fitness, news app. Can you mention a few of them?
Yeah, since you mentioned Keep, so what Keep did is it's a at-home workout app, and what they did is they hopped onto all of the short video platforms like Douyin, TikTok, and for one, they invited celebrities or like professional athletes, like a volleyball player Hui Ruoqi, for example, and then the athletes would actually teach classes, and so that was a really big factor to attract a lot of people into doing fitness from home. And so it's inspired a lot of people to engage in fitness when originally China's population of gym goers was relatively low.
Interesting. So you mean that they leverage some kinds of KOL or people with an authority in fitness in order to get new users and new.
Yes, and this they mostly did this during the COVID-19. So as you can see, the way the pandemic has impacted Chinese people can be really surprising.
You mentioned that not only e-commerce went up, but also entertainment apps. Would you mind sharing what kind of other apps went up and for what kind of use? We all know that Douyin was a big winner in 2019, and it should be not surprising that it would be the winner for the COVID-19 lockdown.
Yeah, so actually, there's three short video apps that we really looked at. Douyin, Kuaishou, and Xigua. So they all have slightly different user bases and they all increased quite significantly. Um, so for example, Douyin in December 2019 had 459 million monthly active users, and then come March, it is now 518 monthly active users. And Kuaishou and Xigua have similar statistics. And each of these groups, they target slightly different user base. So Douyin is more like Gen Z and millennials, tier 1, tier 2 cities. Kuaishou is a little bit of the lower tier cities. And then Xigua is actually known for its higher level content, and it actually has a more male user base. So you can see that these are all tapping into and expanding in those unique user bases. So the short video market is really expanding from COVID-19.
And
Additionally, we can also talk about online reading. Around half of Chinese chose to read novels every day during this time. And then reportedly, a majority of them, 86.2% of them, plan to continue reading online after the epidemic ends. So we will see how long this lasts, but it's another area that has really grown during the pandemic.
interesting. Something we forget, but the biggest market for books is China, and reading novels on a smartphone, on an iPad would be quite natural, actually, and it increased during the COVID-19 lockdown. That's what you are saying, and the question is how people are going to continue to read novels.
Right. And according to a survey, a lot of people will keep reading, but then again, self-reported, like everybody likes to think that they will continue to read,
Sure.
but we'll see how that plays out.
You mentioned e-commerce, and I mean, a lot of people who were not allowed to go out had to use and to rely on e-commerce. And when I was going through the report, I was actually surprised by the low level of users for Hema, for instance, where I would have expected to be much higher in terms of active users. But still, of course, it increased massively during the epidemic in China. What about grocery e-commerce more specifically? And do you see that as a game changer or just a period of time of a few months where people had to use it?
I do think it could potentially be a game changer because once you've used it once, it really releases a lot of the friction to using it for the first time. Everybody was basically they had a lot of pressure to use it for that first time, but now the app is downloaded on their phone, their payment method is plugged in, and so it's a lot easier to maintain a consumer than to acquire a new one. And it looks like the monthly active users for Hema Xiansheng and some of the grocery apps, they stayed pretty stable between January and April. And in April, China was very open. I mean, people could really leave their apartments and go grocery shopping almost like normal again, and they still maintain a lot of their user base.
And what's surprising to me is that we're talking about 2.8, sorry, million
Yeah.
monthly active users for Hema, which is for the size of China very small, and it increased massively again during COVID-19. But the basis was much smaller than what I was expecting. Was that your feeling too when you were reading the report?
Yeah, for the amount of attention that Hema specifically has gotten, I would have expected the monthly active users to be possibly a bit higher. But what's not surprising is the amount of growth I mean, it's grown like nearly sevenfold from December 2019 to January 2020, so over a month-long period. So I think that's the biggest, that's what's the most interesting to me, is that it's grown so much, and then it continues to grow through February, March, April, and so a lot of these users, they appear to be staying on the app. Granted, they might not be ordering the same amount of volume as they were before, but it's still definitely has made a big impact in China.
The irony that Carrefour left China like 9 months before the COVID-19 lockdown, and they could have benefited from it. I feel that's really a wrong timing for this player to go out. I mean, he could have benefited from a very unpredicted event like this. You mentioned also online education, and it grew naturally because students were not at school, and actually they just went back to school a few weeks ago, and it was, I think, early June or mid-June.
Yeah, so online education absolutely exploded. And this is mostly to do with schools. Like, they still require an education, and so these students, they have to download these apps, and they have to learn the way of telecommuting. And so what's interesting is that some of these apps, they've actually grown 50-fold. For example, Shui is an app that it used to only have 124,000 weekly active users, but now that's 6 million, 6.1 million. So that's quite a bit. And what's also kind of funny is if you look at, for some of these telecommuting apps, if you look at the reviews on the App Store, on the Chinese App Store, the reviews are actually quite negative. Because if you look at what the reviews are saying, it's a bunch of kids. The reviews say, like, my school makes me do this online instead of playing my video games. It's a very disruptive app. I wish it didn't exist. So that really shows that a lot of the user base is students who, whether they like it or not, they use these apps for school.
Funny. It was not designed for it initially.
Yeah, well, I think the students are just mad that they have to go to school when they could be sitting at home gaming, participating in other parts of the stay-at-home economy.
Yeah, not focusing much on the app and the function, but the fact that it was taking the time out of their games.
Right.
Telecommunication, of course, the time spent on telecommunication has increased a lot. What can we conclude on that? What are the key learnings on telecommunicating apps and meeting apps for work, for meeting with family, to get news? What kind of learnings can we get?
So some of these telecommuting apps, they have a massive amount of users in such a short amount of time. On the first day of resumption of work on February 3rd, 200 million people logged on to DingTalk to work from home. So that's a lot. Whether the telecommuting apps will continue to be used in the future, of course, COVID-19 is a huge factor that has, again, it's kind of lowered the friction to use it. It's already downloaded on their computers, but whether people continue to use it, whether it really depends on the trust in the workplace. That's a really crucial factor. And then there's also demand for working across regions. 80% of large and medium-sized enterprises in China set up offices in at least 2 different areas. So telecommuting will definitely continue to be used on a pretty large scale. But it'll be interesting to see if having used these apps before during COVID-19 will make it easier for a large amount of people to start working from home, and even start working from home on a daily or like permanent basis, or if it's just going to be something that they will continue to use only for meetings.
Interesting. I guess we will have to update this report in 3 or 4 months to see the state of how home economy has been impacted for the long term. It was just for the short term that it was impacting during COVID-19. Thanks, Alison, for
Yep,
sharing.
thank you. Thank you for having me.